So, hi everybody and welcome back. This is Unreal Engine 5 tutorial series for absolute beginners. This is video 125 and we continue with our collision and we make the final setup, which is we go to our project settings, we go here to edit project settings, click on it, we dock our project settings here on top so we can see it a little bit better, and then we go here down to collision. And now we have here these three options, and these options we learned, at least we learned nothing about it. We learned in our previous video that every object, for example, the static mesh here or my character or the landscape, they have all set up a type which identifies them. What I mean with that is my character mesh, for example, here, this capsule, I go to collision. Careful, they can have sometimes more collisions, but let's assume they have only one collision. And then let's say I click on my collision and we learned, okay, I go to the details panel, I go and write here collision. So I find the collision section, and in collision section, we have here something called a preset. And important for us was here, this object type. It says, I'm a pawn, and this object type was important because this is how the collision reacts to other objects. And we learned also, even we said, for example, I will block all, that works not with collision because the other object must respond to this collision setting, which means if I say I block, for example, I'm a pawn, my object type is a pawn, and a pawn will block, for example, in this case, when we watch here world static, and I say I will block other objects which are world statics, for example, I will block them. This one is the first setup, but you need to check now all the other world statics if they set it the same way. For example, I click now here this static mesh here, and it must say also, you must check now if he set the same thing up. The problem was here we have here, when we go here to the details panel, it says just default, which means we have really opened up this static mesh to see what the default is. In this case, I have to open up this one, go here to the details panel and go here. Okay, I have to write again collision, so it jumps to the collision folder. It's here, that's I need. And here I can, of course, here are more things to read. You can read this in the documentation, but we are interested here in this collision preset, and it says I am overlapping all by default, and my preset is, okay, you can change this. For example, if it says overlap all, you can see it goes here down and set all to overlap, and I don't want, for example, I set block all by default. That's all time good. And now, and now we go check, why is this opening all the time? I don't know. So when we check now, this one says I'm a world static, because that's very important when we talk about collisions. I'm a world static, and my preset is if I find a pawn is this character. You are a pawn here, right? We can check it. Yes, you are a pawn. Then I go to pawn and say I will block. And we learned in our last video, this works only if both set block to each other, right? There is a priority list. If one of them say I will not block, then the other one will, even if the other one said I will block, it will not work. Both have to say block, block. But first, before they can block, they must identify themselves. This pawn, it says I'm a pawn, and I'm interested only, for example, in world statics, which means you are set up world static, but perhaps other things are not set world statics. For example, I can change this type. I can say here, I go to this one here and say, I'm not a world static anymore. You can change this. And we are talking about this one. For example, how we can change this, by the way, here in this collision preset, you can go to custom. Custom means you are going to change settings here, and now it's all available. And now you can say, for example, you can change here how to react to other, or you can even say I change what I am. I'm not anymore a world static. You can say, now I'm a pawn too, for example. Now I'm a vehicle, and now whatever. But world static makes here sense because world static means most time not movable. Let's keep this in world static. But keep in mind, we can change here what we are. And that's very important. And this one will identify us. So we go, but this one is, I hope you read a little bit in the documentation and understand this kind of stuff. We will talk here a little bit more, but this kind of setting here, we want not set it here actually. And the reason for that is we want to use the project setting for that. And why here? Because this is more convenient. Why is this more convenient? Because we can set it up here one time. Like you can see, here is a preset settings. These are all set up for us by the engine, which means we can just use them. Till now, we have most time used them by default. That's very nice. And now we understand this a little bit more and will create our own object types if we want. Perhaps these are not enough for us. And that's why we have to understand this. Okay, let's get into it. We start not with this object types on top. We start this time. Oh, we can start with this object type on top because I talked about this one right now. Because let's set this here to block all again. And here, this object type here, what you see, it says here world static. When we go here, and this world static is actually pre-made. The problem is we can't see it here that it's pre-made. What I mean with that is you can see here presets. Presets means they use object channels and trace channels which are by default made. Let's delete this one here, what I just made. So, and you will have something like so. And this one here we will talk in 1 second, but I think we start with this object type and I click it and you see what it does. Because this object type here, new object channel, not object type, this new, it's called here new object channel, but actually we are creating a new object type here with this new object channel. It's here called object channel, but in real it's just a new object type. And why is this so important? Because this object type is our identifier. We say we are, for example, in this case, world static. And now we can create our own new one. And I create, for example, a new one just for test purposes. I click here this new object. I go here and say new channel is new. All time think about this one as a new object identifier of this thing. And then I call this object type. And let's call it new object type, perhaps new object type. So I call myself new object type 1. And so, and then I can set a default response. Default response means that what you saw here. Oh, let me check. I can't change here. Okay, I set it for first of block, but you can set it ignore, overlap, and block. Here I say block, here I accept, and now I created one. But what was this default response here? Fast, this one. You see here we have here 3 options: ignore, overlap, and block. And this default response is I block all. So no, I block all. My response is block, which means my own. This here, new object type. If you called me by default, I will block. That's the meaning of this one. So for example, right now we have not this object type here. So let's see. New object type is now created. Keep in mind that this is project settings, and project settings works like so that when you close it and start it, it's automatically saved. So I close it and start it. This one will be automatically saved, and I go back to collision again here, and this works now. Oh, and automatically updated. So now I created my own object type. So, but how we can use that? how I can use that. Like I said before, you can change, for example, this type here to your new object type. How we make this again? I go here to the collision. I go here to collision preset, and I don't use this one here don't use this one here, and I use this one here to custom. And let's see, or I use something else. No, I use custom. And then I go here and change this object type, and now you will see here. No, this not. Where is this? The destructible pawn. Wait a second. I make here new object type. Block by default, and they set here present. Let's see, why is this not working? Why can't I change my object type here? That's a little bit okay. It's a little bit strange, because normally you can go here for the character, for example. I go here custom, and here is this new object type available. Or was I blind? Again, happens sometimes to me. And here is not available. That's interesting. Okay, you have to read why this one is, for example, here not perhaps that's why, because I have to reopen this one, save this. Sorry, now I get it. I think this one here was opened, and now I have closed this one and opened this one again because it was not updated, and that's why I was irritated. And that's good. Perhaps it helps you too if you have something like that, and that you have to update this one. The fast way is just close and open it. Let's write this one. Let's go to this preset, and now I have this one, and now here is it. And that was really irritating, but good that I made this mistake, because perhaps it happens to you too, and you are wondering, hey, why it's not popping up. And the issue was it was just not updated. You have to close and open it. And let's continue. And you see now this object type, I created my own object type, which means I say this this thing here, this stone here, this static mesh here, what I created, you are not a wall static anymore. You are this new object type, what I said. And now this means first of all, how you read this. You say, I'm a new object type. I react to the other object types, which are here, object responses. I respond to a pawn, for example. A pawn is my character. I will block it. Interesting is now, let's save this and see what happens. I go back to my pawn. Let's go here to spawn. I go here to its collision. And here I said, first of all, you are not custom. You are a pawn. And I say here, careful, don't be irritated by this pawn here. This is a collision preset pawn. But important is this type here. You must all time start from this type. It says, I'm a collision pawn. That's me. And I react now to. And this is the new thing here, what I created. I react to the new object type with block. And the reason why this one is here set to block, because I set here in my project settings, default response is block. All right, or depends on the default response for pawn can be set also all to block by default. You have to check how this is set, but important is read this all times. So you start with the object type. I'm a pawn. And I respond. I'm a pawn object type, and I respond here. It says object response, and I respond to the other object types. For example, the pawn I will block, and your new created object type, which is now this stone here, is I assigned it this new object type. You are a new object type. I set it to block. And if your stone set pawn as well to block, in my case, it says I'm this new object type, and I set pawn also to block, they will block each other. And I hope you understand this. This is a very nice way to make unique object types, which means you can now define your own object types and say you are this one, and then you can define them special if they should block to each other or not. This is one way. Let's continue and go on. So we have created this one. What is then this preset here? I mean, this one works, this is fine, but this preset is that you don't have all time to go into this collision place here and then try to figure out manually how to set this up. For example, go here and then go here and try to set this to custom, for example. Normally you can set custom and then you can set this up. If you set, for example, custom, then you have to read. So go here, object type, I'm a pawn. Okay, that's my character here. And I react, for example, to this stone here, which is right now not a world static. Right now we have changed this one to new object type here. And I want that my object type pawn should by default block it, but careful, this will only block if the other one set also block, which means I have now to go here. I have now open up this one here and say, okay, I'm the new object type. I will block the pawn response to the pawn and I will block it. And if both are blocking each other, they are really blocking. So that's why we can't go through. All right, that said, I hope you understand this, but this one, you see, it's a little bit much work, right? All time to go in, change the custom here. And yeah, that's why we have this presets here. And this presets is the list here. Let's go here again. For example, here, you can see we have here a long preset list. And when we check this list here, you will see it is the same list what we see here. And that means instead of going all time in this collision preset here and make it manually, set this all up manually one by one and checking, okay, saying I'm the new object type and I want react to the world static with block. I want react to the pawn with block or not with block. Or you can say to vehicle with block or not block or overlap. This can take much time and it's a little bit too much work actually, and that's why we have actually this preset list. First of all, you can learn the presets. These are the engine created for you. You can click one of them. For example, you can click this pawn, double click on it, and this one is created for you. It says if you select pawn, it has this reaction here. And how we react again, you must only read it, right? It says, okay, we have not talked about these other things here. Let's skip them because these are more important right now. We start object type. It says I'm a pawn and I react world static. I want block, but you can change here the preset, which says, oh, ignore this thing here, and pawn, ignore, and think, ignore. You can make, and some set it, some not. You can make what you like here, but careful, we have talked how this will react. This will only work if the other one reacts to this one properly. But normally you would just say, okay, pawn is this one, and we see this pawn has blocked all other things by default, which makes it very easy, which means when you set, for example, I'm a pawn and I block all other objects type by default here, I block them here. That means if one of these other things says I block this pawn here, it will block. That's why they set it most time block here. It's very easy. But if they set it not to block, then you have to think a little bit more. So, but these are only the things which is made by the engine, and you can check them all. For example, the block all says really I block everything. Overlap, and here this overlap all says I will overlap all, and careful again, Well, why is that very important? Again, how you read it, I'm say in this case, this overlap says I'm a world static. And that's very important. I'm a world static and I will react to, for example, the pawn with an overlap. And if the pawn which I overlap, for example, has set block to world static, it will still not block because I have more priority. And the priority list is like this. Block has the lowest priority, overlap the second, I think, and ignore the highest priority, which means if you set ignore, doesn't matter what you set up here, it will ignore all. Or you should read here a little bit more the documentation if this is true. I'm not so sure, but I think it is. So with that said, you can check now or learn this one by default, or just open this one up and see it. Instead of learning all by default, what you make normally is just click a character, for example, go to the collision section and then go to the preset here, open up, and what you normally see is, for example, this has set up pawn by default. And you see this default settings, and if you understand now all these things what I told you so far, then you know, okay, I'm a pawn, I will block wall statics, and to check if I really block this wall statics, I have to check the other object if this is a wall static who set block to pawn as well. This is so the key thing what you have to know, but why I'm telling you this one, there is another reason. This is very convenient. You can use one of them, but of course you can create your own one as well. Like here on top, we created new object type 1, and now I can use this one for special places. And now I can make my own preset as well. Here I have this new button, and now you can see, first of all, you can name your preset self. My preset, I call it my preset here for my preset for character. So let's make a long name here, and then you go here collision enabled, and that's very important. You when you say no collision, doesn't matter what you set here, it will not work because it's no collision, right? That's very important. And we have not talked about this one, but you can read here this one in the documentation what it means. But in if you are a beginner and have no clue, you can all time use the last one, because it will take a little bit performance, but with this one you can't go wrong, at least not in many places, because it will use all the options. And the other ones are more specific. Here you need to check some specific things if it works or not. So with that said, then you go to the object type, and the object type your preset is here. You can use one of the created object types. For example, the engine has only created, in this case, wall dynamic, pawn, physics body, vehicle, and a structure. And here is our new created one. I have created mine because this preset should use now my. Okay, I say I'm a new object type. This is a preset for this new object type. And then you can describe, of course, this one to make it a little bit more clear, because this one, what I create here, will pop up later here. And you see this one has a description place. And I skip this one, but of course you can write something. Let's write my preset, my own preset for test, for example, just for fun. And then the last one is this collision response. And of course you can say here, for example, read this tool opener. Yeah, it says here treated by let's see. All right, this collision response is, you can see if I click this one here, it goes here to all these places, but of course you don't have to use that. You can change this. What I mean with that is, now this created things here, you start again here on top, my new object type should respond to, and these are all the things which you can set on the other object to respond. For example, if you are a wall static, block it. Or I say overlap it, or I say ignore. And yeah, and this thing you are going to do with all the possibilities in your game. For example, we have world statics, and world statics are most time this static meshes, for example, the environment, the stones, houses, and something that's not really moving. And most time you won't block this, right? That makes sense. World dynamics, sometimes you don't want world dynamics to block at all. For example, it can be, but not necessarily. For example, I don't know, there is something moving, right? And it has this object type called here world dynamic. For example, what is moving? Let's say for example, shot is moving, right? Something, a spell is moving with a static mesh, and then you don't set it real to world static, you would rather set it to world dynamic. So the shot is world dynamic, and I want not that this one is blocking. The shot can go through me, then you can say overlap, because we have not talked about this one here. This overlap is also a little bit special, which means it should create overlap events. This is special. Ignore will create nothing. Ignore will just go through and ignore all things. But this overlap is similar to ignore. The only difference is about this overlap. It can create events, and there are two main events which is going to create. One is this create hit events and create overlap events. And this block can also create hit events, but not overlap events, I think. Now, you have to read this creating events in the documentation. It's very important. And then you can say, okay, this world dynamics I don't want block, because block means all time I can't walk through it. And for example, a skill shot that can go through me, yes, go through me, but don't block me. Then I say, okay, make just overlap or just ignore one of them. If you need overlap, overlap means most time or that you will create events and you can code something. For example, if a shot, a skill shot is overlapping you, then you can say this skill overlapped me, which means made damage and my life goes down. Something then you can use, for example, is overlap here. Or you say it can overlap me and it happens nothing. For example, wind. You make a wind object and the wind is yeah, there is wind, but it should not make any damage. It should just go through me and I can ignore it. Then you would say to ignore. And you will go here now through all the possible objects which you can find in your game. And this is convenient because this one you make just one time. After you made this one time and finished, then you say here accept, and you say, and you see now here on the bottom it has another symbol here because this one is created by the engine and this one is your own created. But now you can use this preset here for your own special object types. For example, with your special object you can double click it to see here, but let's close this. It will automatically save. Let's open this one up here. Let's go here to my scene, and this one will I have to close here too if I want see it there, and open this one up fast. All right, which means now I can go to my character. For example, I can go now here to say here's a collision preset. Okay, this custom, it was normally pawn. The character is normally pawn. Why can't what? I don't know what's happening now. Let's go rid of this character for a moment. And I go here to my character. I place it here again. And I go here to details. And here I go preset. Yeah, it's character mesh. Okay. This one is by default character mesh, but you can see it's object type pawn. And now I want to use not this preset. I can use my own preset for character. You see this one we have created, right? Let's go fast to this collision and preset. This one I'm going to use now. This one I can if I want, and this is the new option which I have. You see the list goes longer because I created this one here. And now you can also see what the preset here is grayed out, because yeah, it is set for this one. Gives you information how it will respond to the other objects. So I think with that said, this other trace channel behaves similar. You can read this in the documentation, which I linked already in the last video. This is the same thing here, and here it's with the trace here. I will link this again, and I hope you understand now this one and make a good use of it, because it's really nice to know this and can, yes, make then you can make really nice collision setups so that it can work for gameplay as well. For example, I heard that people make their even collision games, like, I don't know, like a puzzle game, and then you can block it, not block it, and something like that. But you have to understand this kind of stuff in general, of course, to play this game here. And then you will have something like, you see, I blocked this one here, and yeah, this one is really blocking most of things. And yeah, with that said, I think I stopped this. Read this in the documentation, try to understand this one. I think it's fairly important to understand this one here in general, this collision things, so you can set the collisions properly, activate it. And you saw also there are some, let's say, not so fast things which is so intuitively clear. For example, that if you have here a collision that you set to block, for example, old world static, that you expect by that it will block automatically the other one. That's not the case. Think about it. You have to set the other one towards this one. That's really the key thing here, that you have all time check the other thing as well. And then don't forget the priority list, which means this one, even if I had set block to this one and this one has not block set to this one object, then it will not block it, because only if they have both blocked it. This is a very shortcut to thinking. And yeah, the priority list says ignore has the highest priority, overlap the second one, and block the last one. With that said, all is up to you now. I hope it helped. And if you have any questions or any complaints or even tips and tricks which can improve the understanding of this one, write them all in the comments. See you in the next. Bye and good luck so far.